Austin was the answer for about 4 years, from 2019 to 2023. If you were a remote worker, a tech employee, or a young family leaving California or New York, Austin was the sentence you finished every conversation with. Lower taxes, lower cost of living, better weather, live music. A city that felt like it was building something real. The narrative was genuine, and then the market made the narrative irrelevant. Here is what actually happened. Austin's median home price crossed $550,000 in 2026. In 2019, that same median sat at $310,000. That is not appreciation in the healthy, steady sense. That is a city that absorbed 4 years of national migration pressure and repriced itself into the same category as the market's people were escaping. If you left San Francisco in 2021 to escape a $500,000 median condo, and you are looking at Austin in 2026, you have not escaped anything. You have relocated the problem. The rent side is not softer. A one-bedroom in central Austin averages $2,100 a month right now. That number would have been unthinkable in 2018. Austin's entire value proposition was built on the premise that you could live well for significantly less than you were paying on the coasts. That proposition no longer exists in the data. And if you extend beyond central Austin into the suburbs that became the pressure valve, you are adding commute time and distance while only partially recovering on price. The math stopped working, and the map of better alternatives quietly expanded around it. Then came the layoffs. The tech sector that relocated to Austin between 2020 and 2023, the wave that brought thousands of high-income employees and inflated both the housing market and the cultural narrative, that sector contracted sharply. Companies that had moved operations or opened Austin offices reduced headcount significantly. The hybrid and fully remote roles that made Austin a viable relocation destination shrank or disappeared entirely. What you are left with in 2026 is a market that absorbed the price increases of an employment boom without retaining the full employment base that justified those prices. That is a structurally uncomfortable position for any city to be in. To be precise, Austin is not collapsing. The city still has real economic infrastructure, a functioning university ecosystem, and a quality of life that remains genuinely attractive. The problem is the price-to-value ratio at current levels. A market at $550,000 median with a weakened post-layoff job environment and $2,000+ monthly rents is no longer the contrarian, high-upside play it represented in 2019. It is a mature, expensive market competing directly with the very markets it was once positioned as an alternative to. The arbitrage that drove the narrative is gone, and most of the content covering Texas relocation has not caught up to that reality. This is where the rest of Texas enters the picture, and this is where the numbers get genuinely interesting. Texas as a state still offers something that California, New York, and Illinois simply cannot match: zero state income tax on a household income of $120,000. That difference represents roughly $7,000 to $9,000 a year in net take-home pay, depending on the state you are leaving. That is real money. That is a mortgage payment every month that stays in your account instead of going to a state government. The Texas advantage is structural, permanent, and written into the state constitution. What is not permanent is the assumption that Austin is the only way to access it. San Antonio carries a median home price of $270,000. El Paso's median sits at $195,000. One of the lowest of any American city, with a population above 500,000 people. The northern suburbs of Dallas-Fort Worth, specifically Frisco, McKinney, and Allen, average around 520,000, which sounds high until you examine what that figure buys in terms of school district quality and Fortune 500 corporate employment access. The Woodlands north of Houston averages 435,000 and has been ranked the best suburb in Texas by multiple independent national metrics. 4 cities, 4 completely different profiles, all of them offering the full Texas tax advantage that Austin can no longer justify on its own. The story of Austin is not a tragedy. It is a market cycle. Cities that absorb massive migration pressure reprice. That is what they do. The real cost is spending 2026, still making a 2021 decision, still searching for Austin relocation content, without realizing that the arbitrage window closed 2 years ago, and the genuine opportunity has shifted to markets that almost no serious analysis has covered in depth. That is exactly what this is built to correct. 4 cities, real fundamentals, honest numbers, and no interest in giving you the comfortable version of Texas when the accurate version is far more useful. Jennifer was 37, a healthcare administrator from Sacramento, making $94,000 a year with a fully remote contract that she had quietly renewed 3 times without her employer ever questioning her zip code. In 2022, she had a spreadsheet open with 6 Texas cities on it. Austin was at the top of the list because that was where everyone she knew from her industry had gone. She spent 2 weeks running the numbers, closed the spreadsheet, and booked a weekend trip to San Antonio instead. Today, she owns a 3-bedroom house 4 miles from the Pearl District. Her mortgage is $1,420 a month. She has not looked at the spreadsheet since. San Antonio's median home price in 2026 is $270,000. Let that number sit for a moment against the context of what we just covered. Austin at $550,000, coastal markets running anywhere from $600,000 to well over $1 million for a comparable property, $270,000 in a city of 1.5 million people, the second largest city in Texas, and the 7th largest in the United States by population. That is not a typo, and it is not a struggling market. San Antonio appreciated 41% between 2019 and 2026, which means it has been growing steadily and building equity for anyone who bought in, just from a base that remained rational when other Texas markets were overheating. The reason San Antonio has stayed affordable while other Texas cities spiked is also the reason it is one of the most financially stable markets in the state. The city's employment base is anchored by 2 forces that do not respond to tech layoff cycles or venture capital contractions: the federal government and the United States military. Joint Base San Antonio is the largest military installation in the country, employing over 250,000 active duty personnel, civilian employees, and contractors across 3 major bases: Lackland, Randolph, and Fort Sam Houston. That employment base does not disappear when interest rates rise or when a startup runs out of runway. It is structural, recurring, and inflation-adjusted. For a housing market, that kind of anchor is worth more than any tech campus headline. Beyond the military, San Antonio has built a healthcare economy that most national relocation content completely ignores. The South Texas Medical Center is one of the largest medical complexes in the country, housing over 40 hospitals, research institutions, and healthcare facilities in a concentrated geographic area. The sector employs tens of thousands of people at income levels that sustain a healthy housing market without requiring the speculative price-to-income ratios that broke Austin. Healthcare does not relocate to a cheaper state when commercial real estate gets expensive. It grows roots, trains local talent, and compounds over decades. That is exactly what has been happening in San Antonio for the past 20 years, while the rest of the country was watching Austin get famous. The tourism layer adds a third economic pillar that rarely gets factored into relocation analysis. The Riverwalk generates over $3 billion annually in economic activity. The Alamo draws over 2 million visitors per year. The hospitality, food, and entertainment infrastructure built around that tourism base creates a resilient local economy that diversifies income streams in ways that single-sector cities simply cannot match. When the energy sector contracts, or when a tech company announces layoffs, San Antonio's economic floor holds in ways that more specialized markets cannot guarantee. Diversification is not exciting, but it is exactly what you want underneath a real estate purchase. Here is what the appreciations number actually means in practical terms. If you bought at San Antonio's 2019 median of $191,000 and held through 2026, your home is now worth approximately $270,000. That is $79,000 in equity, built on a down payment that was likely under $40,000. The annualized return on that down payment, factoring leverage, is substantial. And it happened in a market where you were not competing with institutional buyers, iBuyers, and all-cash California investors the way you were in Austin or Phoenix during the same period. Lower competition, steady appreciation, diversified economic base. That is the San Antonio formula. The honest version of San Antonio also includes the things that make people hesitate. The summer heat is aggressive. July and August regularly exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and the humidity that comes with proximity to the Gulf Coast makes it feel worse than the numbers suggest. Parts of the city have historically struggled with public school quality, though the neighborhoods that attract incoming professionals tend to cluster around the higher-performing districts in the north and northwest. The job market, while stable, does not offer the high-density tech employment concentration that someone leaving San Francisco might be accustomed to. If you are dependent on a local tech employer rather than remote work, your options narrow considerably. These are real factors and they belong in any honest analysis. But for Jennifer, and for the profile of buyer that San Antonio actually fits, none of those factors outweigh the core arithmetic. A $270,000 median in a city with military-anchored employment stability, a growing healthcare sector, 41% appreciation over 7 years, and a cultural identity that is genuinely distinct and livable. The people who dismiss San Antonio usually do it based on a version of the city they visited 15 years ago, or a reputation they absorbed from someone who never ran the numbers. The numbers in 2026 make a very different argument, and the argument is getting harder to ignore. Marcus and Diane left Irvine in the fall of 2022 with 2 kids, a golden retriever, and a spreadsheet that had taken Marcus 4 months to build. He was a financial analyst, fully remote, earning $145,000 a year. She was a product manager at a healthcare software company, also remote, at $110,000. Combined income of $255,000, and in Orange County, they were renting a 3-bedroom house for $4,800 a month and watching their savings account stay exactly flat. They had looked at Austin. They had looked at Nashville. They ended up in Frisco, Texas, and they have not looked back once. Their mortgage is $2,640 a month. Their kids are enrolled in one of the top-rated school districts in the entire state, and Marcus is banking more money every month than he ever saved in California. Frisco, McKinney, and Allen are not suburbs in the way people who have never been there tend to imagine the word. They are not bedroom communities of strip malls and chain restaurants attached to a larger city by a highway. They are fully realized, independently functioning cities that happen to sit in the northern arc of the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex, and over the past decade, they have absorbed one of the largest internal migration waves in American history. The California exodus that everyone talks about in abstract terms landed somewhere specific. It landed here. The population of Frisco alone grew from approximately 170,000 people in 2015 to over 240,000 by 2026, making it one of the fastest-growing cities in the United States for over a decade running. The median home price in Frisco and McKinney in 2026 sits at approximately $520,000. That number requires context, because on its own, $520,000 sounds expensive, and relative to San Antonio or El Paso, it is. But run the comparison that actually matters for this audience. A $520,000 home in Frisco buys you roughly 3,000 to 4,000 square feet, a 3 or 4 car garage, a backyard, and access to a school district that consistently ranks in the top 5 statewide. In Irvine, that same $520,000 does not exist as a purchasing option for a single-family home. In Palo Alto, it is not a down payment. In Culver City, it is a 2-bedroom condo. The number changes entirely depending on which market you are comparing it against. And for the audience that is actually looking at these suburbs, the comparison is always against a coastal baseline, never against a rural Texas one. The corporate relocation story is what most Texas relocation content misses entirely when it covers the DFW area. Between 2020 and 2026, the northern DFW corridor attracted a wave of Fortune 500 corporate headquarters and major regional offices that fundamentally changed the employment landscape of the region. Charles Schwab moved its headquarters to Westlake, just southwest of the Frisco corridor. Toyota's North American headquarters relocated to Plano. McKesson, one of the largest healthcare distribution companies in the world, moved to Irving. J.P. Morgan Chase expanded its Plano operations significantly. These are not satellite offices or regional branches. These are decision-making centers with senior leadership employment, and they sit within 30 to 40 minutes of McKinney, Frisco, and Allen. For a remote worker, that means optionality. If your company ever pulls back on remote work, you are living in an area with a genuine local job market at the income level you need. The school district argument deserves its own paragraph because for the Stephanie avatar, the parent making a relocation decision with kids in middle school, it may be the single most decisive variable in the entire analysis. Frisco ISD and McKinney ISD have both earned recognition as among the top-performing independent school districts in Texas, a state with over 1,000 school districts. The metrics are concrete: standardized test performance, college readiness scores, AP program participation rates, and graduation outcomes all rank significantly above state averages. For a family leaving Los Angeles Unified or a large Chicago district, the contrast is not marginal. It is categorical. The quality of the local school system is often the reason people say they cannot leave expensive coastal markets. In North DFW, that reason disappears. The honest risk in this market is price trajectory. $520,000 is not cheap, and the appreciation that drove values to this level has compressed the entry point advantage that made DFW extraordinary in 2019 and 2020. Buyers entering this market in 2026 are not getting the deal that buyers got 4 years ago. Property taxes in Texas also run higher than most states, typically between 1.8 and 2.2% of assessed value annually, which adds a meaningful carrying cost on a $520,000 purchase that new residents from low property tax states sometimes fail to model accurately. On a home at that price point, you are looking at approximately $9,000 to $11,000 per year in property taxes, which needs to be factored into the true monthly cost of ownership before any comparison to a renting scenario makes sense. But here is what the data actually says. For a household earning $200,000 or more, the dual-income remote profile that defines the core of this migration wave. In Frisco, that income puts you in the upper quartile of local earners. The purchasing power differential from the zero state income tax alone returns $12,000 to $15,000 annually compared to California. The lifestyle infrastructure, restaurants, retail, parks, entertainment, has matured dramatically over the past decade and no longer requires a trip into Dallas for quality options. And the school system is genuinely excellent without requiring a private school tuition line item that coastal families often budget as a necessity. North DFW is not the cheapest option in this analysis. It is the option where the total package, income leverage, employment access, school quality, and long-term stability, assembles into something that is very difficult to replicate anywhere else in the country at this price point. Sandra was not looking for a suburb. She had spent 11 years in Seattle, earned her way into a senior engineering role at an energy consulting firm, and had a very specific idea of what she did not want. A grid of identical houses, a 40-minute drive to the nearest decent restaurant, a neighborhood that felt like a set built for a TV show about people who had given up on interesting. She visited the Woodlands on a Thursday in October, expecting to confirm her prejudices, and booked a second trip the following weekend with her husband. They closed on a 4-bedroom home 8 months later. Her commute to the Houston Energy Corridor is 28 minutes. She has not thought about Seattle's cost of living since. The Woodlands is 28 miles north of downtown Houston, and the distance matters because it is not close enough to feel like a neighborhood of Houston, and not far enough to feel disconnected from one of the largest energy employment markets in the world. It was developed beginning in the 1970s as a master-planned community, a concept that sounds corporate until you actually walk the property, where the original developer mandated that a substantial percentage of every residential lot be preserved as natural green space. The result is a community of 115,000 residents where mature pine trees line the streets, where creeks and waterways run through residential neighborhoods instead of concrete drainage channels, and where the built environment was designed from the beginning around the premise that where you live should feel like somewhere worth living. Multiple national rankings have named it the best suburb in Texas. Several have placed it among the top 5 suburbs in the entire country. The median home price in the Woodlands in 2026 is $435,000. That positions it above San Antonio and significantly above El Paso. But the comparison that matters is not between Texas cities. It is between the Woodlands and the markets this audience is leaving. $435,000 in the Woodlands buys a 4-bedroom home with a 2-car garage, a backyard, access to one of the highest-rated school systems in the Houston metro area, and a neighborhood infrastructure that includes over 200 miles of hiking and biking trails, a world-class outdoor concert venue, and a town center that functions as a genuine commercial and cultural hub rather than a highway-adjacent strip mall. Run that same $435,000 in the Seattle metro, and you are negotiating over a 2-bedroom condo in a building with a waiting list for parking. The employment anchor that makes the Woodlands financially serious, rather than just aesthetically appealing, is the Houston Energy Corridor and the broader energy sector ecosystem that surrounds it. Houston is the energy capital of the world, in a functional, not merely symbolic sense. ExxonMobil's massive campus sits in Spring, adjacent to the Woodlands. Chevron Phillips Chemical, Huntsman Corporation, and dozens of mid-size and large energy companies maintain significant operations in the immediate region. The Woodlands itself hosts corporate offices for companies including Aon Hewitt and McKesson's regional operations, adding a healthcare and professional services layer that diversifies the local employment base beyond pure energy sector exposure. For someone in engineering, finance, logistics, or executive management with any connection to the energy industry, the Woodlands places you at the geographic center of the most concentrated employment base in that sector anywhere in the country. Here is the number that contextualizes the quality of life argument in financial terms. The Woodlands has maintained among the lowest crime rates of any community its size in the state of Texas for over a decade running. The Conroe Independent School District, which serves most of the Woodlands, consistently ranks in the top tier of Houston area school districts by academic performance metrics. The community's healthcare infrastructure includes Houston Methodist, the Woodlands Hospital, and Memorial Hermann the Woodlands Medical Center, 2 major hospital systems with full-service campuses, which means that unlike many suburban markets that require driving into a major city for specialty medical care, residents have access to serious health care within 10 minutes of most residential addresses. These are not lifestyle amenities in the brochure sense. They are variables that affect your daily time budget, your family's educational outcomes, and your long-term financial exposure to healthcare costs. The honest limitations of the Woodlands are real and worth naming. The community's design, while beautiful, is almost entirely car-dependent. There is no meaningful public transit, and virtually every errand, school run, and social engagement requires driving. The summer climate mirrors the rest of southeast Texas, hot, humid, and persistent from May through September, in a way that takes genuine adjustment for anyone relocating from the Pacific Northwest or the Northeast. And the energy sector employment base, while deep and resilient over long cycles, is not immune to commodity price volatility. The oil price contractions of 2015 and 2020 both had measurable effects on Houston area employment and real estate markets, and the Woodlands felt those effects even with its diversified corporate base. But the case for the Woodlands is ultimately the case for a very specific buyer profile. The professional household earning above $130,000 with school-aged children, a connection to energy or professional services employment, and a quality of life standard that they are not willing to sacrifice in exchange for a lower price point. For that buyer, And the data suggests that buyer exists in very large numbers among the people leaving Seattle, Denver, and Chicago right now. The Woodlands is not a compromise. It is a destination that happens to carry a price tag 40% below what a comparable quality of life would cost in the markets they are leaving. That is not a subtle advantage. That is the entire argument. $195,000. That is the median home price in El Paso, Texas in 2026. Take a moment with that number because it requires some context to fully absorb. El Paso has a population of approximately 700,000 people, making it one of the 25 largest cities in the United States by population. It is not a small market, not a rural outlier, not a city in economic contraction. It is a major American metropolitan area with a functioning job market, a university system, a significant military presence, and a cross-border economy that operates at a scale most people outside the region have never thought about. And its median home price is $195,000, lower than virtually any comparable size city anywhere in the country. Kevin had been a financial analyst in Chicago for 3 years when he started running the El Paso numbers. He was 29, earning $92,000, paying $2,100 a month for a one-bedroom in Lincoln Park, and deeply aware that he was building no meaningful wealth. He had looked at Indianapolis, Columbus, and San Antonio. Then a single data point stopped him: El Paso's price-to-income ratio. The median household income in El Paso is approximately $52,000. The median home price is $195,000. That is a ratio of approximately 3.7, one of the healthiest price-to-income relationships of any American city above 500,000 people. Kevin, arriving with a $92,000 income, would enter that market as a high earner with structural purchasing power advantage over the majority of local buyers. He closed on a 3-bedroom home for $188,000, 8 months after running that first spreadsheet. His mortgage is $1,010 a month. The employment foundation underneath El Paso's housing market is Fort Bliss, one of the largest military installations in the United States. Fort Bliss covers over 1 million acres and is home to the 1st Armored Division, generating a military and civilian employment base of over 30,000 active duty personnel, family members, and civilian contractors. That number does not fluctuate with interest rate cycles or corporate earnings calls. It is a federal commitment embedded in the city's economic structure, providing consistent housing demand and income stability that private sector-dependent markets simply cannot replicate. The University of Texas at El Paso adds a second institutional anchor, employing thousands and driving a research and healthcare ecosystem that has been growing steadily over the past decade. For a market at this price point, the employment fundamentals are far more resilient than most analysts expect when they see the headline number. The border economy is what makes El Paso genuinely unlike any other city in this analysis, and unlike almost any other city in the United States. El Paso sits directly across the Rio Grande from Ciudad Juarez, Mexico, one of the most industrially active cities in Latin America, with a manufacturing base that includes hundreds of maquiladora plants producing goods for the American market. The daily cross-border commercial flow between El Paso and Juarez generates billions of dollars in annual trade activity, supporting logistics, finance, legal services, and supply chain management employment on the El Paso side. The borderplex economy, as regional economists call it, functions as a single, binational metropolitan area of approximately 2.5 million people, the largest bilingual, binational workforce in the Western Hemisphere. For professionals in trade, logistics, international business, or any sector connected to U.S.-Mexico supply chains, El Paso is not a geographic afterthought. It is a strategic location. Now here is the risk, and this one needs to be named directly because it is the variable that most distinguishes El Paso from the other markets in this analysis. El Paso's economic vitality is structurally tied to the health and stability of the U.S.-Mexico trade relationship and to federal immigration and border policy. When that relationship is smooth and trade volumes are high, El Paso's border economy thrives. When federal policy tightens border crossings, disrupts supply chains, or creates uncertainty for maquiladora operations, the economic ripple effects land in El Paso faster and more directly than anywhere else in the state. The market's extraordinary affordability is not a secret. It reflects in part the risk premium that sophisticated buyers have historically applied to a market this exposed to geopolitical and policy variables that are entirely outside local control. That is not a reason to eliminate El Paso from consideration. It is a reason to understand exactly what you are buying into before you make the decision. For the right buyer profile, the El Paso calculus is almost impossible to argue against. A remote worker with a stable income above $75,000 enters this market as a top quartile earner, purchasing in the most affordable major city market in the state at a price point that requires as a down payment well under $50,000 on a conventional loan. The carrying cost of home ownership at this median, assuming a standard 30-year mortgage at current rates, is approximately $1,000 to $1,200 per month. That is a number that allows aggressive savings, investment, and wealth accumulation simultaneously. The open loop we planted earlier, the risk that almost nobody talks about, now has a name and a frame. El Paso's affordability is real, its fundamentals are genuine, and its risk is specific. The question is not whether the numbers work. They clearly do. The question is whether your income and your plans are insulated enough from border policy volatility to make the bet confidently. For Kevin, running his analyst spreadsheets from a home office in a city where his mortgage costs less than a week's worth of Chicago takeout, the answer was yes. The no state income tax headline is the reason Texas shows up in every relocation conversation. It is the first thing people mention, the first line in every blog post, the bumper sticker version of the financial argument for moving, and it is real. But the way most people apply it to their decision-making is almost entirely wrong. They treat it as a flat benefit, equal across every Texas city, and they stop the analysis there. What they miss is that the tax advantage interacts differently with each market's property, tax structure, cost of living, and purchasing power dynamics. The actual number, the dollar amount that lands in your account rather than in a state treasury, varies significantly depending on exactly where in Texas you land. Start with the baseline. California's top marginal state income tax rate is 13.3%, the highest in the country. New York's combined state and city rate for New York City residents reaches approximately 14.7% at higher income levels. Illinois runs a flat rate of 4.9%. Washington State has no income tax, which means a Seattle resident moving to Texas captures a smaller direct tax benefit than someone leaving San Francisco or Chicago. For a household earning $90,000 a year leaving California, the state income tax savings from moving to Texas lands at approximately $6,300 annually, depending on deductions. At $118,000, that number climbs to roughly $8,400. At $145,000, you are looking at $10,000 to $11,000 per year in additional take-home pay every single year permanently for as long as you live in Texas. That is not a one-time moving bonus. That is a compounding annual advantage that accumulates over decades. But here is where the city-by-city math diverges in ways that matter. Texas funds its public services, schools, roads, emergency services, primarily through property taxes rather than income taxes, and property tax rates vary by county and municipality. In San Antonio, effective property tax rates run approximately 2.1 to 2.3% of assessed value annually. On a $270,000 home, that represents roughly $5,700 to $6,200 per year in property taxes. In Frisco or McKinney, rates run similarly between 1.8 and 2.2%. but applied to a $520,000 home, the annual property tax burden climbs to $9,400 to $11,400. In the Woodlands, effective rates are comparable to the DFW Suburbs, which means the $435,000 median carries a property tax bill of approximately $8,000 to $9,500 per year. El Paso runs slightly lower effective rates, and on a $195,000 home, the annual property tax lands at approximately $4,000 to $4,800. Now run the complete net calculation for someone leaving California at 3 income levels to understand what the city selection actually means. A household earning $90,000 saves approximately $6,300 in state income tax by moving to Texas. In El Paso, their annual property tax on a median-priced home is approximately $4,200. Net annual tax position improvement versus California, roughly $2,100 positive. In San Antonio, at $270,000, property taxes run approximately $6,000. Net position, essentially break even on taxes, but with a dramatically lower purchase price and cost of living. In Frisco, property taxes at $10,000 or above actually exceed the California income tax savings for a $90,000 earner, meaning the tax advantage functionally disappears, and the case for Frisco at that income level rests entirely on purchasing power and school quality, not on tax savings. The analysis changes entirely for a household earning $145,000. The California income tax savings exceed $10,000, which more than offsets the Frisco property tax burden and puts the net tax position solidly positive. This is the calculation almost nobody runs before they make the move, and it produces genuinely counterintuitive results. El Paso is the city where the tax math is cleanest at every income level. The property tax burden is low enough and the purchase price modest enough that the income tax savings translate directly into net financial improvement with almost no offset. San Antonio is strong for mid-range earners where the appreciation, upside, and affordable entry price outweigh the moderate property tax load. The Woodlands and North DFW only fully capture the tax advantage for household incomes above $110,000. Below that threshold, property taxes begin to erode the benefit in ways that buyers from low property tax states consistently underestimate. These are not arguments against those markets. They are arguments for running the actual numbers specific to your income before assuming the Texas tax advantage is the same everywhere. There is one more variable that compounds across all 4 cities and that never appears in the headline comparison: cost of living delta on everyday expenses. Texas has no state income tax, but it also has no state-level rent control, competitive utility markets, and in most cases, significantly lower grocery, dining, and services costs than the major coastal metros this audience is leaving. A household in San Antonio spending the same percentage of income on living expenses as they did in San Francisco is effectively giving themselves a raise that has nothing to do with their employer. When you stack zero state income tax, lower property costs, lower daily living expenses, and a purchasing power position that puts you structurally above the local median income, the total financial picture is not just incrementally better. For the right income profile in the right Texas city, it is categorically different. And the difference is measurable in the specific numbers we have been walking through, not in the abstract promise of a tax-free state. Every piece of relocation content you have ever read about Texas ends in the same place: a highlight reel. Lower taxes, lower costs, more space, better weather, said by someone who has never spent August in San Antonio or February in a house without power. The willingness to show you only the upside is not helpfulness. It is a brochure, and the people watching this have been handed enough brochures. So here is the part of the Texas analysis that most content skips, softens, or buries in a footnote. The real risks, named directly, organized by city, without the cushioning language that protects the narrator more than it protects you. Start with the risk that belongs to every Texas city on this list without exception. The grid, in February of 2021, Winter Storm Uri knocked out power across Texas for days, killing over 200 people and causing an estimated $195 billion in property damage. The root cause, an energy grid that operates largely independently from the national interconnected system and was not weatherized for extreme cold events, has been partially addressed through subsequent state legislation and utility investment. Partially. The Texas grid has made measurable improvements since 2021, but independent energy analysts continue to flag capacity margin concerns during peak summer demand periods, and the structural isolation of the ERCOT grid from national backup resources remains a fundamental architectural reality. If you are moving to Texas, you are accepting a grid risk that does not exist in most of the country. The financially rational response is to budget for a home generator as a non-negotiable purchase within your first year, not as a luxury, but as infrastructure. The heat deserves more respect than it gets in most relocation discussions. Texas summer is not the same experience as a hot summer in Chicago or a warm summer in Seattle. In San Antonio, the average high in July is 95 degrees Fahrenheit with humidity that makes it feel over 100. In the Woodlands and the Houston metro, the combination of heat and Gulf Coast humidity creates a physical experience that genuinely limits outdoor activity for roughly 4 months of the year. El Paso runs hotter and drier, which is more tolerable for some people, but represents sustained triple-digit temperatures from June through September. The North DFW suburbs are marginally more temperate than South Texas, but still average over 95 degrees for extended stretches of summer. If you are a person who derives significant quality of life from outdoor activity, morning runs, weekend hiking, or simply spending time outside from May through September, this is a material lifestyle variable, not a footnote. Water scarcity is the long-term structural risk that the Texas relocation conversation almost never addresses, and it is the one that concerns independent analysts the most when they look at 20- and 30-year horizon planning. Texas is the second most populous state in the country and one of the fastest growing. The aquifers and river systems that supply its major cities are under increasing stress from population demand, agricultural use, and climate-driven variability in rainfall. And in San Antonio draws heavily on the Edwards Aquifer, a finite underground water source that has been under management restrictions during drought periods. The Dallas-Fort Worth region depends on a complex system of reservoirs that have experienced below normal capacity during extended dry cycles. Water pricing, water availability during extreme drought years, and long-term municipal water planning are risks that buyers in Texas need to research at the specific municipal level before committing to a purchase, because they are not equally distributed across the state and they are not going away. Now, the city-specific risks. One, San Antonio's public school quality is uneven in ways that matter enormously for families. The North Side and Northeast independent school districts, which cover the areas where most incoming professionals purchase, perform well above state averages. But the city's overall school district landscape includes underperforming areas that require buyers to be precise about neighborhood selection. A zip code error of 5 miles can mean a categorical difference in school assignment. For San Antonio, the homework is not whether to buy, it is exactly where. In North DFW, the specific risk is price trajectory and property tax compounding. Frisco and McKinney have appreciated significantly, and entering at current medians means your equity cushion in the first 2 to 3 years is thinner than it would have been for buyers who moved in 2020 or 2021. Combined with property tax bills that can exceed $10,000 annually, the total carrying cost of ownership is higher than the purchase price alone suggests. The Woodlands carries a concentration risk that is worth naming plainly. The energy sector employs a large share of the professional workforce in the immediate region, and energy sector employment is cyclical in ways that other professional sectors are not. The oil price contractions of 2015 and 2020 both produced measurable increases in Houston area unemployment and temporary softening in residential real estate values, including in the Woodlands. The community's diversification into healthcare, finance, and corporate services has reduced but not eliminated this exposure. If your own income is tied to the energy sector, you are doubling down on a single risk factor. Your job and your home value would be exposed to the same adverse scenario simultaneously. That is a portfolio construction problem worth thinking through before you sign. El Paso's risk was covered in full in the previous chapter. Border policy exposure and geopolitical dependency, but it bears repeating here in the context of a complete risk picture. It is the highest single variable risk of any market in this analysis, and the affordability of the entry price is the direct financial expression of that risk premium. None of these risks eliminate any of these cities from serious consideration. They are the information you need to make a decision that holds up in the bad years, not just the good ones. A channel that tells you only where to go is selling you something. A channel that tells you where to go and exactly what could go wrong when you get there is giving you what you actually came for. You watch this far because you are serious about making a decision that actually changes your financial trajectory, not just a decision that feels safe or sounds reasonable at a dinner party. So here is what this analysis actually says when you compress it into a verdict, not a list of considerations, not a reminder that your personal situation is unique. A direct answer, organized by who you are, based on everything the data has shown over the past several chapters. 3 profiles, 4 cities, 1 honest recommendation for each. If you are Daniel, fully remote, household income above $120,000, no kids yet or kids under 5, optimizing primarily for financial freedom and wealth accumulation over the next decade. The data points to San Antonio, with a strong secondary case for El Paso, depending on your risk tolerance. San Antonio gives you any $270,000 entry point, a diversified and recession-resistant employment base underneath your home's value, 41% appreciation over the past 7 years from a base that is still rational, and a city with enough cultural infrastructure, food, and lifestyle substance that you will not feel like you traded your life for a mortgage payment. The income tax savings from leaving California or Illinois land cleanly here because the property tax offset is manageable at this price point. You bank the difference between your old rent and your new mortgage, and you build equity in a market that has demonstrated steady, non-speculative growth. If you are willing to accept El Paso's border policy risk and your income is genuinely remote and stable, the $195,000 median produces a monthly carrying cost under $1,200, which means you are simultaneously living well, building equity, and saving aggressively enough to fund a second property within 5 years. That is a wealth-building scenario that does not exist in Austin, does not exist in Nashville, and certainly does not exist in San Francisco. If you are Stephanie, dual-income household, kids in school or approaching school age, hybrid work with a requirement to be physically present in a metro area at least part of the week, optimizing for family stability and long-term quality of life with a financial floor underneath it. The answer is North DFW, specifically Frisco or McKinney, and the school district data makes that verdict nearly inarguable. The $520,000 median is the highest entry point in this analysis, and you need to run the property tax math carefully before you commit. The annual carrying cost on a home at that price is meaningfully higher than the purchase price alone implies. But the school district quality, the Fortune 500 corporate employment concentration within commuting range, the community infrastructure, and the purchasing power position you arrive with from a coastal income all combine into a package that is genuinely difficult to replicate anywhere else in the country at this price. You are not moving to a suburb. You are moving to one of the best-performing family communities in the United States at a price point that your coastal income can access in a way your coastal neighbors cannot. The comparison is not between Frisco and San Antonio. It is between Frisco and Irvine, and that comparison is not close. If the DFW corporate employment base includes your industry and your employer has any presence in the region, This is the most complete answer available to your specific profile in 2026. If you are Kevin, single, early career, income between $85,000 and $110,000, no dependents, thinking simultaneously about personal financial stability and building an investment portfolio, the verdict splits cleanly into two phases. Phase 1, El Paso. Phase 2, San Antonio or North DFW. El Paso at $195,000 median with a sub $1,000 monthly mortgage is the most powerful wealth accumulation launching pad in this entire analysis for someone at your income level and life stage. You are not choosing El Paso because it is the most exciting city on the list. You are choosing it because the financial math at your income creates a situation where you can own a home, cover all your living expenses, and still save $3,000 to $4,000 a month on a $92,000 salary. And that savings rate, sustained over 3 to 4 years, funds a down payment on a second property in a higher appreciation market. The risk is real, and it was named directly. Accept it with open eyes or mitigate it by ensuring your income has zero exposure to border-dependent industries. If El Paso's risk profile sits outside your comfort zone, San Antonio is the alternative that gives you a slightly higher entry price, $270,000, with meaningfully lower geopolitical exposure and the same structural purchasing power advantage over the local median income. Here is the one conclusion that applies to all three profiles equally, without exception. The window in these markets is not permanent. San Antonio has been undervalued relative to its fundamentals for years, and the spread between its price and Austin's price will eventually compress as more buyers run exactly the analysis we just ran. El Paso's extraordinary affordability reflects a risk premium. If that risk profile improves, or if remote work patterns continue driving buyers toward low-cost markets regardless of local employment conditions, the entry point narrows. North DFW has already moved significantly from its 2019 baseline, and every year of delay is a year of appreciation that leaves you on the outside of, rather than inside of. The buyers who moved to Frisco in 2020 are sitting on equity that new buyers in 2026 are paying a premium to access. The analysis is clear. The markets are identifiable. The decision sitting between you and a structurally different financial life is not one of information. You now have the information. It is one of timing, and the data already made that decision for you.